The Senate Intelligence Committee held an unprecedented 10th open hearing today. This time was Attorney General Jeff Sessions in the hot seat, and he came out swinging.
Let me state this clearly, colleagues. I have never met with or had any conversation with any Russians or any foreign officials concerning any type of interference with any campaign or election in the United States. The suggestion that I participated in any collusion, that I was aware of any collusion with the Russian government, is an appalling and detestable lie.
Throughout the hearing, Sessions would not discuss any private conversations he had with the president, a refusal several senators took issue with.
I am not stonewalling. I'm not claiming executive privilege because that's the president's power, and I have no power to claim executive privilege.
So did Sessions help his boss's cause at all? And does Donald Trump need help? Joining me are Nancy Gertner, former federal judge at the U.S. District Court here in Boston. Judge Gertner, it's good to see you. And she teaches at Harvard Law School, by the way, now, and civil liberties attorney Harvey Silverglade. Harvey, it's great to see you. Before we get to some big issues, smaller, did Sessions do anything to help Donald Trump today or hurt Donald Trump?
I think it was sort of in the middle. What he said on the one hand didn't make sense.
Which?
When he says that he could participate in the firing of Comey but recuse himself from the Russian investigation, he and his boss are at loggerheads. He recuses himself from the Russian investigation. The boss fires Comey because of the Russian investigation, and he participates in that. It simply doesn't make any sense.
So does that damage his boss in any way? Or does it
I mean, it suggests this is still the gang that can't shoot straight. That's the problem.
But that's not a crime, not shooting straight.
Not that particular one is not a crime.
Sessions do anything to help or hurt the boss or no?
I don't think he's really very relevant. I think it's the boss who's going to be relevant here. Sessions has always been a kind of small guy in stature and every other way. I don't think he's relevant.
Put, Harvey. So before we leave Sessions for a second, what I don't understand, either with the two intelligence officials who were testifying the other day or Sessions today, when they refuse to answer a question and they say there's no executive privilege, there's no attorney-client privilege, they just don't feel like it.
No basis.
Is there any basis? So why aren't they held in contempt by Congress?
Because Congress has to vote. Because we're sort of in the impeachment world again. In other words, this is not a court determining contempt of Congress. There has to be a vote of the House or the body that did this. Otherwise, it's not contempt. But you're right. There is no basis, and he should be held in contempt.
Do you agree with that?
Yes. It's a big deal to get a witness held in contempt and forced. It's not worth it in this particular
But they have no legal
instance.
basis to refuse to answer the question.
None. Zero.
Can we get to the thing where
they don't need a legal basis.
I understand. Well, unless they're held in contempt.
That's a big unless.
If we talk about a bigger issue, I know you have a difference of opinion. If Comey is telling the truth, and for purposes of this discussion, let's assume he is Donald Trump guilty of obstruction of justice, Judge Gertner?
I think he clearly is, if believed. I think that there's enough to, it's what your premise was, if he's believed.
If Comey's to be believed.
When you think about it, what was the act? The act here was to tell Comey, lay off Flynn. You have to look at it in context. If you said to the Suffolk DA, lay off my brother's investigation, who cares? But you have to put it in context. This is an act, and the law defines this as an act whose natural and probable consequence would be to obstruct justice. He talks to Comey the day after Yates is fired. He talks acting Attorney General Yates. He talks to Comey the day after Flynn has resigned. It's clear that this is all in the context of an effort to stop the Flynn investigation. And the Flynn investigation is really the core investigation here that has legs.
You don't agree with this, Harvey, do you?
I don't. I think that the president can't tell somebody to lie. But short of something like that, this is the president, and he's the chief executive, and he can pretty much stonewall as much as he wants and have his people stonewall.
So he can never obstruct justice, no matter based on your criterion, no matter what he does, he can't obstruct justice?
He's the president. And the fact is that he is the chief. He's everyone's boss. He's Comey's boss.
But if he told Comey to lie, or if he called him up and said, Deep Six the records, if Deep Six the records, I don't want any more records of this. Or
that
if he
would
told
be
him,
a crime.
And the crime is obstruction of justice.
But I didn't hear anything that Comey tells. Assuming one believed Comey, which, by the way, I have trouble believing.
Okay, but let's assume for purposes.
But assuming that Comey was telling the truth, I didn't hear anything that put the president in any jeopardy.
But you seem to be saying two different. I'm sorry.
It's not you. It's what's the natural and probable consequences of this action? And what Comey said is, I've been been a U.S. attorney. I've been in the FBI. I can tell you, I got that message. So the question is, what's the continuum here? If the president had said, stop it. Stop it. That would be obstruction of justice. This is the
But he
functional
can't stop it. But wait a second. He can't
has the
stop
right
an
to do it.
investigation.
He has the
president-
constitutional power to
No,
stop the
the
investigation.
president has the power, but can't exercise that power for a bad purpose, for the purposes of protecting himself, for the purpose of protecting others. There's a thing called an abuse of power. It's a totalitarian regime that says just, l'état c'est moi, just because I'm doing it, it's right. There's an abuse of power issue.
Actually, it is so, because to try to figure out Trump's what he really had in mind, what his motives were, it's impossible. It's a fool's errand.
But let me respond to that. Let's put things in sequence, because I don't think you can take it out of context. You have, do you want this job at that little dinner? Can you give me a loyalty pledge? Again, assuming Comey's telling the truth. Can you give me a loyalty pledge? Can you help out my friend here, General Flynn, who we both like? And by the way, you're fired. So if you follow that continuum...
You've got to even add to that, the loyalty question comes the day after Sally Yates tells them that Flynn, the day after Sally Yates tells them that Flynn was having conversations about sanctions, and the do something about Flynn conversation takes place after Flynn retires. This is all of a piece.
So even if you're right, Harvey, if you put all those together...
No, the president can fire Mueller. The problem
the Assistant Attorney General says he can't fire Mueller, said only he can fire Mueller.
And he can
order that Mueller be fired.
But Mueller can only be fired for cause.
But go ahead, go back to your argument.
But, one man's cause or one woman's cause is another one's political gambit.
There has to be something.
So I want to get back to, you said originally, he has the power to fire this guy, meaning Comey, et cetera. But then when Judge Gertner gave you an example, he said, well, that would be obstruction of justice. Where's the dividing line?
Dividing line
in all these circumstances. Where's the dividing line?
If the president orders a future crime to be committed, then he's committed a crime. However, I don't think he could be prosecuted. And the reason is this is a guy perfectly capable of pardoning himself.
That's a different issue.
Well, it's not a different issue, because all of this going after Trump is a fool's errand. We're being distracted from the real goal here.
What is the real goal here?
The real goal is 3 years from now electing a president who deserves to be sitting in the White House.
Yeah, but the issue today is whether or not the guy has committed a crime.
Committing a crime, I mean, it's true that when a president commits a crime in office, the remedy for that crime is impeachment.
Correct.
He can't be indicted.
But you don't even need a crime to impeach. I mean, that's
right.
Sort of an extra legal procedure,
That's right, but certainly within the range of what's impeachable is abuse of power and interfering. Think about it again. We're talking not just about the Russian collusion, but presumably the FBI is also investigating the Trump family's economic ties to Russian banks. If he interferes with that, I don't know that. Well, I know that only from the media, But if he interferes with that. Yes, he has the power to do that, but it would be an abuse of power for which he should be impeached.
You'd agree with that, yes?
An abuse of power. The president can be impeached. I think that we're going on the wrong road trying to analyze the crimes committed by the president. And instead, this is really an impeachment case. And that would be serious. What's going on now is bread and circuses.
So something else happened last night, which I found to be stunning. When this guy who's headed Newsmax does an interview with Judy Woodruff on PBS and says the president is contemplating, I shouldn't put it that way, he has at least talked about the possibility of firing Mueller.
Yeah.
Your contention, I want to be clear here, he directly does not have the power to fire Mueller. He'd have to direct the Assistant Attorney General, and then a la the Saturday Night Massacre, when the Assistant Attorney General refused to do it, he'd fire him and put somebody in place who would do it.
He can get Mueller fired. That's true.
But what's extraordinary about that, there is a framework here. There are regulations. Forgive me, I'm talking law, right? There's a framework here, and the framework says that the special prosecutor can only be fired for cause or dereliction of duty. So, yes, someone would have to contrive cause or dereliction of duty, or they would have to ignore the law. So, yes,
what's the consequence of ignoring the law?
Well, that would be an impeachable offense. I mean, there are the notion that the president has no limits.
Power. The president has the power.
It would be, as they say, ultra-virus, beyond the law if he were to do that. It would be an abuse of his power.
This is a guy who is capable of abusing his power.
But to say that because he can technically manipulate the levers of power doesn't make it right and doesn't mean there shouldn't be
Can I understand this with where I think is common
right.
ground? You both agree that he has this broad swath of power. The issue is what constitutes an abuse of that power. If you agreed on the facts, you would be with
how
it.
that gets remedied.
What does that mean quickly?
Which
It's
is
only remedied
impeachment.
by impeachment.
Right. With that, well, that
Which
is
is
in
a
fact,
political process.
that is true, but it's different. Firing Comey was different than were he to fire Mueller. Mueller was protected by a series
Understood.
of rules that came about after Watergate.
Judge, it's nice to see you. Harvey, it's nice
Thank
to see
you.
you as
What a
well.
mess,
Thank
huh?
you both. What a mess. Is that what you said? Good to see you both.